This week, Ron DeSantis was sworn in as Florida's 46th governor after a lengthy recount of midterm election votes in Palm Beach and Broward and Miami-Dade counties. Following Tuesday's swearing-in ceremony at the Capitol, Governor DeSantis laid out some of the issues he plans to focus on as he starts his new term.
To our local and federal law enforcement partners, the state of Florida will work with you to keep our people safe, particularly the safety of our schools. We must never turn a blind eye to those who represent a danger to our schools and community. We cannot sacrifice the safety of our people at the altar of social experimentation. We will stand for the rule of law. We will not allow sanctuary cities, and we will stop incentivizing illegal immigration, which is unfair to our legal immigrants, promotes lawlessness, and reduces wages for our blue-collar workers. We also cannot allow Florida's reputation to be further tarnished by the repeated failure of a small number of counties to conduct elections in a transparent and lawful manner. One generation of botched elections is enough. So let there be no misunderstanding. As governor, I will lead with purpose and conviction on behalf of the people of Florida. If the legislature engages in wasteful spending, I will veto it. If local official is neglectful of required duties, I will remove that official. If our environment is threatened, I will move to protect it.
And joining me now to help break down some of Governor DeSantis' priorities is Catherine DiPaolo, university instructor at FIU's Department of Politics and International Relations. She's been here before. Catherine, always great to have you.
Great to be here.
He laid out a lot of things in that inaugural address. Some of those we're going to get to in just a moment, primarily talking about the environment, which he's starting to tackle almost right away. But first of all, let's talk about Ron DeSantis. Who is he? Florida Trend magazine came out and said to a lot of folks, he's kind of a mystery man. He's relatively young. So let's talk a little bit about Ron DeSantis, the man, and who he is.
Well, he's 40 years old, certainly of Generation X, and the first governor from that generation. And I think you see some of those priorities, including the environment, becoming important. And that's, I think, a generational effect. He's married, has two very young children. That's the first time in the governor's mansion for many years to have young kids.
Yeah, and he's Ivy League educated, went to Yale, went to Harvard Law. He was in the military, Judge Advocate General in the U.S. Navy. So, yeah, so this is who we have as our new governor. Again, let's talk about some of those plans that he has, laying out his priorities, especially when it comes to the environment. Let's go ahead and talk after this and talk about, let's roll what he had to say about Florida's waterways. Take a look.
I will lead efforts to save our waterways. We will fight toxic blue-green algae. We will fight discharges from Lake Okeechobee. We will fight red tide. We will fight for our fishermen. We will fight for our beaches. We will fight to restore our Everglades. And we will never, ever quit. We won't be cowed. And we won't let the foot draggers stand in our way.
Wow, talk about that. Let's talk about what his plans are. We're already into his first week, just about. He was inaugurated on Tuesday, and he's already come out this week with some of his plans and how much money he's going to use towards fixing up our waterways. $2.5 billion, more so than we saw with Governor Rick Scott. So talk about what some of those priorities are and what that's going to look like.
Right. I think he's going to be a very different governor compared to Rick Scott on the issue of the environment. He wants to protect the Everglades. As he said, he wants to fight blue-green algae, red tide, as much as the government can do on that matter. But I think making that a priority is a real shift, even as a Republican taking that on. But he is a Floridian, and certainly all Floridians are very concerned about the environment.
All right, so one of the issues that we saw also this week, there are 3 openings in Florida Supreme Court. He went right away and already named a successor. Her name is Barbara Lagoa. Talk about that and talk about who she is.
Right. Well, she's an FIU alum and a member of the 3rd District Court of Appeals, so the appellate court just under the Florida Supreme Court. So these list of 11 names to replace 3 justices on the Florida Supreme Court were really provided by judicial nominating commissions through a process of merit selection. And basically, a lot of these nominees are selected for the commission from Governor Rick Scott. So these really are a sort of Scott's list of appointees that then Governor DeSantis has to choose from. So this was a big deal. This is a big deal, I think, for Miami, the first Cuban woman on the Florida Supreme Court, and I think a real win for DeSantis.
Now, some in the African American community were upset that that list from the JNC didn't have any black candidates on that. So talk about that.
Right. Well, per the Constitution in this process, these JNCs, Judicial Nominating Commissions, select a number of people. And so since there's 3 vacancies on the Florida Supreme Court, there's 11 names, and those are the only names that DeSantis can choose from. So it is understandable. It's going to be the first time in many years that there's not an African American on the Florida Supreme Court.
One of the things he said at Lagoa's ceremony announcing her as his pick was that he's going to be back in South Florida very soon, kind of alluding to the fact that he may remove Sheriff Scott Israel from office. So talk about that.
Well, there were reports as early as Tuesday that Sheriff Israel was already moving things out. Untrue, but this is the sort of rumors that are going on. So I would not be surprised. I think he has hinted, and perhaps even more than hinted, that he's willing to remove Sheriff Israel, and I think there are some who would like that move. But he has to be careful. You know, Broward is the most Democratic county in the state, so he can't make it look like just a political retribution either. Yeah,
and just so that our viewers know, we record this on Thursday, so by the time it airs, perhaps we will see some sort of move when it comes to Scott Israel. We'll have to see. Also, before Governor Rick Scott left, he made 84 appointments. Are those some, and I think Governor DeSantis has already hinted that he may rescind some of those appointments. Talk about why Governor Scott would do that as he's exiting the office. Why would he make all of those appointments?
Well, I think he really wants to make his mark on the bureaucracy and have a sort of longer standing influence. You know, these appointments, though, if they ended on this date, you know, before he left the governorship, I think he certainly felt it was his job to appoint these people as well.
So we'll see what happens. One of those also was Brenda Snipes, who was the election supervisor in Broward County. We're going to have to see what happens with that as well, though she's already been removed from office by Governor Scott, and he appointed somebody else to her position already.
Right. Well, the courts are considering that as well,
and
kind of slapped Governor Scott on the wrist the other day and suggested, however, that she would not necessarily gain her position, but will have a hearing for the Senate.
Exactly. We're running out of time quickly. What are some of the other things I know he's going to tackle that you think he's going to tackle?
Well, certainly education and putting Richard Corcoran in as head of the Department of Education, school vouchers.
School choice is big for him.
Expanding, you know, vocational education in high school, certainly healthcare. Hospitals are concerned now. Certainly wants to make pricing more transparent. Those are certainly 2 top priorities.
So much more to talk about. We'll have to have you back. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
Always great to have you with us. And which issues do you think Governor DeSantis should prioritize as he starts his term? We'd love to hear from you. Send us your take on this or any topic that matters to you. As always, you can reach us by email or via our Twitter or Facebook page @YourSouthFL. Leave a comment or post a video. We might even share your comments on the air. We look forward to hearing from you.